My name is Ole Thastrup. I'm CEO and co-founder of 2cureX. And I have with me Martin van der Linden, being our Chief Business Officer. Now, what we are going to walk you through today is this agenda. We'll start with some breaking news, and then talk about 2cureX and our prime product named IndiTreat. Then we will lay out to you the commercial path until the launch of the IndiTreat product. We will show you what achievements we have achieved already on that journey, and then what are our future plans. But let me jump to the breaking news. Now, it is 2 weeks ago we announced that 2cureX have received CE-IVD marking on our prime product IndiTreat. This has been a major undertaking, and I must admit, when starting this, I hadn't anticipated how much work it is. I think there's probably about 1,000 to 1,500 pages in the documentation, and a great thanks to 2cureX in all its corners in Denmark and in Germany, and also to our external assistants. The CE-IVD was a milestone that we announced last year when we IPO'd, and obviously we have to say that we met that milestone. What does it make for us then? Well, it is a kind of a commercial passport, a trade passport, to sell the IndiTreat in Europe. And if we look at the first entity that we have in this CE-IVD, that is colorectal cancer. On an annual basis, about 500,000 patients are diagnosed with the disease. Of these, about 260,000 are offered medical treatment. These 260,000 are in essence eligible to our IndiTreat test, and that makes a market size of approximately 8 billion Swedish. But not only is this a gateway, a necessary gateway for us to get into the market, it's also blue stamped the 2cureX organization. Now, as I mentioned, we did promise that we will meet this goal in 2018. We have. This will prepare our launch into Europe. And Europe, that is, in this sense, the 30 biggest countries that are in the European Economic Area, EEA. Another important aspect is that this tremendous documentation is more or less a template that we can use when we go into other cancer entities. And we have already announced that we have started clinical trials also in ovarian cancer. So what's going to happen next is that we slot that into the documentation and get that CE-IVD registered as well. Let me then jump to the problem. The problem that this technology will solve is that cancer treatment is not very efficient. You have heard this before, and about 3/4 of the patients we treat do not respond as first-line treatment. It's about the same as you see with Alzheimer. With cancer, it can be devastating. We may not have a second chance. And even more important, if a patient is resistant in first line, they very often are the same in the second line because some of the drugs are combined, so there's some of the same drugs being used. So we need to hit them initially with an efficacious treatment. And this is where IndiTreat comes in. Those of you that have heard us before may have seen a movie that we have presented. We're not going to present it today, but I will encourage you to go in our website and download it. It shows sort of in very graphical terms what this is all about. In short, what we do when a patient comes in is we take a small tissue sample from the primary tumor or the metastases that have spread throughout the body. This is something that is done anyway. From that small sample, we will generate thousands of microtumors that we then challenge with different treatments. So in essence, very simple. And we will challenge it with hundreds of treatments. It could be monotherapy or it is combination therapy. And then, as you will see here in my top panel, here we have our microtumors. This microtumor is challenged with a treatment that the patient is resistant to. This is the worst situation that you can get in. It does not work. The microtumor just keeps growing. Whereas the lower panel, there we have identified a treatment to which the patient is sensitive. So that would be the treatment that we will offer to the patient. Now, as I said, in principle, this is rather simple. We've actually seen it since the 1940s for infectious diseases. There, if you have an infectious disease and want to figure out what kind of bacteria are there, how should they be treated, then you probably know that you just take a small sample, maybe from the mouth or blood, and then you put it out on an agar plate, dump different antibiotics down there, and the one in which you see that there's a clearing zone, you see that, so the big zone here, that's the one you'd pick. So 2cureX will do for cancer what bacterial testing have done for infectious diseases. These microtumors are very complex, as are the tumors or the metastases. These are small organs. You should regard a tumor as an organ that is constituted by a number of different cell types, microenvironment, and all that stuff. And that we can capture in our microtumors. And we have loads of information also published showing that they correspond to the tumor in vivo in the patient. This is an example of a IndiTreat screen. In the top up here, I don't know whether you can see the pointer in the video, but up here we have treatments. These are standard treatments, individual drugs and combinations thereof. And going down, we have a number of patients. Now, on the drug sensitivity part out here, now if you should be inflicted with a cancer, you should hope that you are in the green area. That's where a treatment is effective. You are sensitive. It's just bad luck if you go into the red area, and that's the big problem with cancer resistance. And what this table shows you that there's not one single of these treatments that work in all patients. You just see how it goes. There are none of these that have the same color, and that is what we have known for years. Cancer patients are extremely heterogeneous. So we need to find the right treatment for the right patient, matchmaking. We are currently in 2 cancers. We have clinical trials in colorectal cancer and in ovarian cancer. They are a little bit different in sort of their, both their presence and the way in which we're going to treat them. Colorectal, that's actually the second most diagnosed cancer in women and third most in men. Average age of our patient is about 70 years, and the overall survival after 5 years is about 60–65%. And as said, there are close to 500,000 of these in Europe a year. The other cancer is ovarian cancer, and here it's called the silent killer. We also heard that a bit earlier, that others use that term. It's called the silent killer because these women, they identify that they have a disease very, very late in its development. Actually, 75% of the patients we see, they have metastasis. So the disease has spread to distant organs. So they are in a desperate situation. And 80% of them will, when we treat them, they will come back with resistance. So a devastating disease that we need to have better tools to handle. How does these trials then look like? This is a patient in our colorectal cancer trial where the patient is resistant. You will see that the panel of drugs this patient have been offered, these are standard treatments, they are all red. There's one, oxaliplatin, that have a slight effect. What we then do in this trial is that we add what we call off-label. So what you have out here that are drugs that are not normally used in colorectal cancer, but they are approved. That's very important. They are approved. They can be used the day after we do the screen. And here, luckily for the patient, here is a combination of 2 drugs called TAS-102 that was effective. That is what the patient then is treated with. I would just point to another drug that we have here. It's called olaparib. That is for the technical interested people, it's a PARP inhibitor, a relatively new drug. It's not registered for colorectal cancer, but it is for ovarian and for breast. And ovarian, that's where we run the other trial. Let me mention where we run it. We run it at sites, major hospitals in Denmark, Bispebjerg Hospital, Rigshospitalet, Vejle Hospital, in Hamburg, at University Clinic Eppendorf, Hamburg, and in Birmingham, Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. I'll just point your attention to one other bubble, Europa Colon. That's a very important partner of us as well. That is the biggest patient association within colorectal cancer in Europe. They are pushing it out to the patients, which is extremely important for us. A team, and you have 2 members here, that have done this before. And then we have a board of directors where we have some experienced people, both within biotech, medtech, investments, and sales, not the least. I will just jump to this as a conclusion on my part. What we've shown you is that we have moved cancer to treatment of individuals. And the technology IndiTreat is heavily protected. The last patent was issued here in the summer. We have clinical trials in colorectal and ovarian, and we have a strong competitive edge. We are the first test that have been CE-IVD registered of this kind. And then we have our partnerships with leading hospitals and key opinion leaders. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you so much. Yeah, what I wanted to do is to, after you've heard a little bit about our technology, is to take you through what we have done since 2017, since we had our successful IPO, that was in the end of 2017. And what we did in 2018 was really focus on getting on track with our milestones. And we actually had quite an ambitious plan for 2cureX to achieve a few things during the year. And I'm really proud to show this to you, because what you see in green is what we have achieved in 2018. And basically what it means is we have all our clinical trials are on track. We've made sure of that. We have secured a funding from Europe, Horizon 2020, 3 million euros, of which we got our first payment in March of this year, the end of Q1. 1.5 million euros. We have started on our new cancer entity, ovarian cancer, also with a clinical trial. And on top of that, we have secured the CE-IVD marking. What we are going to do further in 2018 is actually looking at additional cancer centers in the markets that we want to be present in. So that will be in Germany, in Scandinavia, but also in the UK. So that is for 2018. For 2019, we need to be ready for commercialization of IndiTreat. So our focus there will be secure commercial readiness. And what we want to do is we want, of course, finalize some of our clinical trials to build the story around IndiTreat. We are going to make sure that we as an organization are ready to launch IndiTreat. And we are going to make sure that we get the ISO 13485, which is a quality stamp as well, which is really important to enter in additional markets beyond our scope for launching IndiTreat. And then in 2020, launching of IndiTreat. So that brings me to a question for you, actually, which is why invest in 2cureX? And what we think is that there is a significant opportunity for a product like IndiTreat. As you heard from Ole, there is an issue with treating cancer patients. We need tools to better help these patients. So we call this a low-risk, high-gain investment. And there is a medical need for it. There is a very strong competitive profile. We have a strong clinical network, and we also have, the commercial launch planned for 2020. And 30% of the big patient potential that Ole showed is actually in our initial launch markets. So just the key points here for you. Remember, the 70% of the patients are not reacting to their cancer therapies. And the potential is really this big number of 260 cancer patients that are actually annually eligible for a test like IndiTreat. So we are really passionate about improving cancer treatment, and we want to bring this to the market. And what we have as a vision is to establish IndiTreat as the global standard for predicting an individual cancer response to drug therapy options. We have more information on our website, and actually we have also some information packages which you want to read through all of the things we said here later in the coffee break. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ole, Martin. Really interesting. From a layman's perspective, this sounds like a no-brainer to be able to try out first which therapies will work for your cancer. But what are the you're looking to market launch in 2020? What will be you think the main hurdles or challenges to actually make a big breakthrough in the market?
I think that obviously there are barriers. Now, it is, however, important to remember that the drugs that we test are approved. So there's not a drug risk. These drugs are already on the market. So, and removing the hurdle of CE-IVD certainly makes it a lot easier. But we need to make the hospitals, the oncologists, the patients aware of this. And that is a hurdle. And I think one of the biggest hurdles for companies like 2cureX and medtech companies is to get into the hospital system. And we are born into the hospital system. We have been living with bad oncologist coffee for 10 years. We know exactly how the hospital works. And we are both at hospitals here and in the UK and Germany. And I think that's important. So these guys will be the marketeers. It's key opinion leaders in these countries. So they will go out and tell the story, the clinical story. And then we have the patient organization that, I mean, I'm being called by patients that say, oh, Ole, couldn't you treat my mom, myself? And I have to say each time, well, you can be included in one of our trials if you fit the inclusion criteria. With the CE-IVD, we actually can start to screen without having a clinical trial. So I think it will be push from our partners in hospitals and a pull from patients.
An important part then of your market strategy is, of course, reimbursement. Who will be paying, and before you get there, so to speak, if people calling you up now want to be treated or want to use your test.
Right. So this gentleman is the guy that will earn us money.
Well, we know that different markets have different reimbursement systems. And there are different options we are looking at. Obviously, the best will be to be adapted into clinical guidelines. Then there is a real set that the test will be used. But in certain markets, there's also, with the insurance companies that want to, look at how can we get value for money, and health technical assessments. There are definitely different options per market, but we're looking at all those mechanisms as we speak.
And right now you're into it's colorectal cancer and it's ovarian cancer. What about potential there are so many cancer types? What are the limits there?
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we are exclusively in solid cancers. So we're not in blood-borne cancers, but in solid cancers, we have shown that it works in other cancers as well. So you will hear from us in the near future that we are in other cancers as well. But we want to make sure that the hospitals we have and the oncologists are experts in that specific cancer. So we are not going to do 15 cancers.
Okay. One step at a time. So,
sure.
Thank you very much, Ole and Martin.
Yeah.